all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio a Navy veteran, Stephanie Gattas from Texas. Stephanie, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part of today's show.
Well, it's going to be a great conversation, an important conversation, and we're going to talk about military sexual trauma and the work that you're doing with a group called the Pink Berets. But before we get there, how did a nice Texas girl like you end up enlisting in the Navy at 18?
Well, I can tell you that it was definitely an impulsive decision. It was not something that I had planned. It wasn't one of those things where, generationally it was, the rite of passage. It was really a decision I made based on what it is that I wanted to accomplish in my life at that time. And I can tell you that, I had received a postcard in the mail, back then when we weren't looking at social media or anything like that. we were.
Oh, you're aging yourself now. We'll talk about your years of service, but you just gave it away. So you received a postcard for people who don't know what that is. It's a little piece of paper. They put a stamp on it and they mail it to you.
And that's how we received our information. Yes, for certain. And this postcard spoke to me in terms of, what it said on it. And I just felt like I could be part of something bigger than myself at that time. And when you're young, you're very vulnerable in terms of the things that you're trying to do, and you're not quite certain what direction you're supposed to move in. And that's where I was. I wasn't certain what direction I needed to move in. And this, pretty much implored me to move in the direction of the military. And so that's what I did. I enlisted into the Navy, and I distinctly remember not sharing the news with my family until it was close to time for me to leave. And that impacted them. That impacted them in a way I didn't know that it would, because I was so immersed in what it was that I wanted to do at that time that I didn't think about everybody around me. So.
Well, it's interesting because some people go into the military, as you say, because it's sort of a generational rite of passage. You go in and serve. Some folks go in because they want to go to college and they can't afford to go to college. Some folks go in because the judge says you're either going in or you're going to jail. I had one of those interviews recently. So there's a lot of different reasons people go in, and women in particular have a different set of reasons. You went in 1994 and served to 2002. And interestingly, had an assignment, maybe your first assignment was on a submarine tender. So talk a little bit about what you thought you were going to do when you joined the Navy and what you actually ended up doing when you joined the Navy.
That is a great question, because I distinctly remember not knowing what I signed up for. So, you go in, you test, they give you versions of MOSs that they feel you could really adapt to in the military, or you scored. So these are your options. And I distinctly remembered being told that I scored to where I could become a paralegal of sorts. It was named something different, but I remember it being more so on the side of law, which wasn't unusual because that we have family members that are attorneys. So I thought, okay, that's interesting, but I do not want to do that. So with my first assignment going to the USS Simon Lake, what was really interesting to me is that I had no idea that I was going on this ship that was larger than life and that was situated behind an island nonetheless. It was I came with a group of women that was one of the first group of women to integrate with men on this ship. So unbeknownst to us at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of women on subtenders. And for those that aren't familiar with subtenders, like we would move missiles onto the submarines or the fast frigates or the destroyers that would come alongside the subtender. And you could have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 plus people on one subtender. So you can imagine, it was a town on water, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't think unless you've been on a ship, and I have, people don't realize how big they are, how many people are there, that you don't, they're not small little things where you get to know everybody in the whole ship. You might know folks in your unit, but what specific MOS or work were you doing on the subtender?
So interestingly enough, and when I look back on it, it is a little comical. I will tell you this. I had a recruiter who told me, oh, well, if you don't want to go into legal studies, well, then maybe you could do something like a seaman where you have an option to choose what MOS you want once you enter. And I was like, oh, you mean I could choose any job that I'm interested in? And he's like, oh, yeah. He goes, because, you could do this or you could do this or you could go this route. And in my mind, it was like, okay, I didn't want to do anything as a paralegal or an administrative assignments with the legal department. It just wasn't something that spoke to me at that time. And so I opted to become a seaman. And that was, as I quickly learned, the grunt work. That was not the best decision.
Right. That's the bottom of the totem pole here is basic seaman. And this is what happens with recruiters, and this is what happens with 18-year-olds who don't know any better and don't. And the lesson here, veteran radio listeners, Stephanie's trying to tell you is, you should talk to people when you're getting recruited in who maybe know more of you and can help drive certain decisions, maybe, because being Absolutely. The basic seaman isn't much of a decision.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And again, if I knew then what I knew now, it would look different, but then I wouldn't be the person I am today. However, I am, just as you said, letting people know, be more informed. Just be more informed of what it is that you want to do when you enter. You're more apt to succeed than if you go into this blindly and then you regret your decision, right? So becoming informed, really knowledgeable about the areas you're wanting to work in once you enter the military can be very fruitful for you. I tell people I credit the military for a lot of who I am today, good and bad or indifferent. And so I think it's important, for us to be able to teach others, as in terms of what those learning opportunities were for us, right? Those teachable moments. But what I can tell you is that, I didn't stay in that realm for long. I excelled. You have these different areas of as a seaman on board a ship, deck 1, deck 2, deck 3, where then you're driving the captain on one of the boats onto the island away from the ship. There were some really cool things that I got to do as a result. And then I decided while I was there that I was really interested in the medical field. I remember us training in fire party and learning just various techniques with the corpsmen. And that's when I decided this is what I want to do. I want to go to school and become a corpsman. I want to study and become an HM. And that's the direction I moved in, because I just felt like I was actually accomplishing something and giving back to people and helping people, no matter what it was, whether you were helping someone that was ill, or you were helping get somebody bandaged, or you were helping, administer an injection or draw blood or run an IV. I mean, there's just numerous things that you're taught that end up being to your benefit later on in life. So for me, again, the Navy and the things that I was able to do really just drove the momentum for me, and obviously where I am today. What, as a servant leader, what you learn is what you're going to apply later in life, and that's exactly what I feel I've done.
Well, these are really formative years when you go in at 18 and you're in there for 4 years. You're right, you learn a lot of good. Unfortunately, there's always some bad that goes with it. But you learned what you wanted to do. You didn't want to be in the legal field. Hey, I want to be in the medical field. And really, if you look around and talk to medical professionals, you'll find so many of them got their interest when serving. Maybe they were a medic, or maybe they had a great experience with a medic, and that kind of, because of GI Bills and other things, and training in the military, let them move forward in their field that they're going to, their professional field after they got out of service. What was the last ship that you were on, Stephanie?
So I didn't go from one ship to the next. I ended up going to Camp Lejeune. And so, and that was at the Naval Hospital there in Camp Lejeune. And that to me was another experience that I had not imagined. So after you have your ship duty, you can then go to shore duty. And so that's what I ended up going to. At the time, I wanted to get out of the Navy, and I kind of just shifted gears. But what I can tell you is that, it's all the same in terms of whether you're on shore or you're on a ship. The Navy is the Navy, and rules still apply and experiences still apply. So what I can tell you is that everything comes full circle.
Yeah,
right?
And again, there are a lot of pluses, but there's some minuses, and I want to sort of move to those because it's what you're doing today to help so many other people. Unfortunately, it's estimated that 6% of women in the military are sexually assaulted, and another 24% experience sexual harassment. And this is a pervasive problem in the military. It's certainly a pervasive problem in the Navy. And in the Navy, because ships were not integrated at the same rate or speed, and you mentioned that the subtenders weren't, subs were not, this continues to be a problem that we're facing today. You faced it back in the early 2000s, but it's now 23 years later or something, and we still have this problem of young men, young women, men in authority sexually harassing or assaulting women and men, both on duty and off duty. And that's sort of one of the situations you found yourself in, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. That is correct. And, the interesting thing that you mentioned is that we are here many years later, and it is still an issue. But what I see now that I think a number of us have not seen before is the needle moving forward. And what that means is that, there is all eyes on what we call an epidemic in the military, and they are doing something about changing what this means to those that are entering the military. They're really heightening awareness when it comes to sexual harassment. They're heightening awareness, as a bystander, if you witness something in terms of a perceived sexual assault or inappropriateness on really any level. There's heightened awareness in terms of, maybe we need to change what training looks like to our newly enlisted soldiers or Marines or shipmen or guardians or, those in the Coast Guard. It's all relevant across the board in the armed forces. I see from my vantage point that the Department of Defense and the Veterans Affairs are really working hard behind the scenes. And I have, the honor of being able to see all these changes taking place. And so I could tell you with absolute certainty that what we wouldn't see before, we are definitely seeing now. And people are adamant that things have got to change, that this is no longer something that can be permissive. They're taking a look at toxic leadership. They're taking a look at, what is it in terms of educational opportunities can we provide to the armed forces to ensure that these numbers don't continue to increase and that men and women are not being harassed or sexually assaulted. You see a high prevalence for women, but the unfortunate thing is that it does happen to men. They just don't report it as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So can you imagine that? So when we take a look at the numbers, we know that those numbers are an estimate. There's no accuracy. And the sad part is it's likely those numbers are much higher. But the thing is, the Department of Defense is aware, and the Department of Veterans Affairs is aware, and they're all actively working on change. And when I say actively, I mean they have really put in place committees that are discussing this on a daily basis. I'm part of 2 of those committees, and I can tell you right now that the work is constant. They're really holding people accountable in terms of really gaining understanding on what I like to say it's a new military, right? What the new military looks like today, because now you have social media thrown into the mix. You have, people getting real-time information that they couldn't get before. You have OnlyFans. I mean, you have so many platforms now that are giving people access to be able to commit certain crimes. And so now it's really amped up, this awareness with the Department of Defense and with the Department of Veteran Affairs that, we have to have our eyes on much more than just what's happening internally, but what's happening externally.
Yeah, there's a whole cultural issue here beyond the military.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That has to be addressed, and we have a situation where you're right, it's both men and women, but as every 10 years go by, every decade goes by, we have more women in positions of leadership. We have more women in positions of counseling and therapy and psychiatrists and medical professions that interact in this field. So I think all of those are positive steps. And we're facing a time when the military is having a difficult time recruiting and meeting its all volunteer force numbers. And you can't say, oh, well, we have this harassment problem, but we're not fixing it. Well, if you don't, you're cutting out a big segment of the population for their brains that you need to be part of that all volunteer force these days. So it's good to hear that you're experiencing a whole lot of work out of it or seeing a whole lot of work out of it because in your experiences, you had this assault during some shore leave, and it leads to we refer to it as military sexual trauma or PTSD resulting from it. That has to be. It then takes years to get beyond it. And I think one of the interesting things are groups like yours. So tell us about what the Pink Berets is doing and how it's healing survivors of military sexual trauma.
Absolutely. So the beginning of the Pink Berets was for this very reason, right? There wasn't really anything out in the early 2000s, mid 2000s that really addressed military sexual trauma or PTSD or traumatic brain injuries. There was a lot that was developed for men in mind because of, men being involved in special forces and really seeing a lot of what was taking place during operations. And they really didn't lend what it could be for women to have their mental health impacted once they separated from the military or while they were serving. And so what I was finding was that there wasn't really any organization out there at the time. I venture to say there wasn't one that really identified the needs of women and focused on the needs of women. And so I felt like, okay, then I have to do something about that, because if I can't find the help for myself, how about my sisters in arms? Are they going to find? They're not going to find the help either. How about those that are needing help? And I kept reading stories about women that were either committing suicide or they were found dead in their barracks, and they couldn't identify why. And then later on, it surfaces that these women were sexually harassed or sexually assaulted, and then it resulted in a death. So to me, something had to be done, and so I created the Pink Berets. And I can tell you.
And this was in 2015, and it started in Texas, if I understand it right.
That is correct. The inception was in 2015.
But interestingly, and I want to make sure we don't run out of time to talk about this. It's a holistic approach, which is what I find fascinating and so important to get the word out about what you're doing. So talk to us about the programs and the kind of whole health holistic approach.
Absolutely. So, holistic approach is really taking this mindset that you don't have to have medicinal intervention. Those are some of the stories that I was learning as well, is that, I'm getting help, but I'm put on all these medications and I'm having these suicidal ideations and I can't function and I don't want to leave my home. And it was just a downward spiral. And I think that when you think about the holistic approach, you're really moving them in the direction of doing things that you would probably naturally do in your day-to-day, except you are incorporating some of these new opportunities like equine therapy, which has been really impactful for the women that have participated in it. You're honing in more so on what art therapy means, and it's not just painting on canvas. I mean, it's utilizing your motor skills and working with organizations like Help Heal Our Vets, who really provide some of those tactile type art therapy opportunities. And then we incorporated, my personal favorite was culinary arts. The culinary arts for me was where I found healing, and I felt like that was something that would be really unique. I had not seen it in our space at all, where we incorporated culinary art as a way of helping women navigate their healing journey. Is it through food? Is it through, the sensory experience? Is it through the visual of plating food and making it look like art? I mean, there's so many things that can make it fascinating. And then we created these outdoor retreats where it was all encompassing, where we would provide, those individual therapy opportunities, group therapy, equine, art, culinary, and now our newly minted program, which has been very successful, archery. So, we're taking this approach where it's like, apply what's ailing you into the program that we're offering and allow that to shift your focus. Find a new found zest for life through these opportunities, without feeling like you have to commit to medication.
And it's so important to be with other people, kind of get out of the house, right? Get with
Correct.
Other folks. When you talk culinary arts, it's a kitchen environment. When you're talking archery, it's an outdoor environment, but it's with other folks, and all that is part of the healing process, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, I can tell you, the various testimonials that we receive. I received 2 yesterday, and it's truly your driving force when you see and learn and hear the impact of these programs and what it's doing for these women. I mean, that's the proof. What more proof do you need than somebody telling you, I've tried everything and I was really not sure I could move on, but I gave this a try, and now this is what I've accomplished so far.
And the numbers are amazing. You've served over 3,600 women through your online and in-person programs. I mean, you're having a big reach. The Pink Berets. It's got to feel great, because in 2015, when you started this, you said, "Hey, there's nobody addressing this at all."
No, and nobody believed in it. Believe it or not, I
Right.
had people tell me, "Don't do it. Nobody's gonna go for it." Like in all women's, come on, that's silly. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I
So,
think
so tell us a little bit about, again, before we run out of time, why don't you tell us a little bit about how the program is funded and how people can find out more and be in touch to support the cause.
absolutely. So we're very live on our social media platforms. And so a number of times we'll run campaigns where people can participate in these campaigns. It helps with our fundraisers. Like right now, we have a fundraiser for a Pink Berets t-shirt. It's a partnership with Grunt Style. They're running a campaign for us. We were able to design our shirt. And as of right now, that is actually something that's very successful. We have some people that are very excited about buying the t-shirt. But you buy the t-shirt and then a portion of that, the proceeds go back to the Pink Berets. But at any time, if anybody wants to donate, they can go onto our social media or our website. We are privately funded, but we are working on grants this year because of the strength of the programs and the fact that we've got a waiting list for some of these programs. But really, volunteerism is also huge. We love having the ability to work with volunteers. They get to see internally what it's like. They get to immerse themselves in our programs, and they get to build on the camaraderie with other women. So that's really the gist of what you can achieve in terms of donating and volunteering with the Pink Berets.
We're talking to Navy veteran Stephanie Gattas, who came out of the Navy, pretty angry, having suffered sexual assault and PTSD. But as I talk to you now, I hear a person who is invigorated with the mission she's on. And it leads me to a question that I'll ask a lot of folks here on Veterans Radio. As you think back on it, you're now in your late 40s, you think about that 18-year-old kid. But I'm sure there are parents and young women and young men who approach you and say, would you join the military again? Should I join the military? What kind of reaction do you have to that question?
I say absolutely. Absolutely, 110%. Because let's look at it this way for a moment, Jim. It wasn't the Navy that did this to me. It was an individual. And it would not have been any different if I was outside the military and I was going to college and it happened while I was in college, or if I was in corporate America and it happened while I was in corporate America. This is an institution that people are honored to be a part of, and that should not go away, again, because it made me who I am today. And because we've had these very unfortunate circumstances take place while we served, it is not, a strike against the armed forces. It's just unfortunate that there are people serving who just don't understand that it's a crime, right? And that
Wow.
You could potentially ruin somebody's life. So I would say to them, do it, but be knowledgeable, be informed, ask questions.
Right. Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. Those would be the main things that I would share. And I just did this past weekend. So
well, I'm thrilled with your answer. I think I haven't heard anybody summarize it as well as that, and I really do appreciate that. Now, I can find the Pink Berets on social media like Facebook or Instagram. Do you also have a website that you want to direct people to?
Yes. So our website is thepinkberets.org. Not to be confused with .com. It is thepinkberets.org.
Well, we're certainly glad you had some time for us today on Veterans Radio, Stephanie, to talk about your journey and the important holistic work that the Pink Berets are doing, and we certainly hope people look into what you're doing and find a way to help out.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's it's always an honor to be able to talk about the Pink Berets and the work that we are doing.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. We appreciate all your support. You can go to veteransradio.net, click on the sponsor level, and continue to support keeping Veterans Radio on the air. And until next time, you are dismissed.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.